Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. So my classic album inspection today is Black Sabbath's 1983 album, Born Again. It's 40 years old today, September the 12th, 1983 it was released. So this is a real curio in many ways in the history of Black Sabbath, in the history of heavy metal, because it's the only Black Sabbath album with Ian Gillan on vocals. I can still remember the time when the news was released that Ian Gillan was the new singer of Black Sabbath. People might forget there's a little bit of controversy around the Gillan band at the time. So Ian Gillan had disbanded Gillan, I think on the basis really that it wasn't financially making sense. Obviously Gillan were very popular in the UK and probably parts of Europe, but they weren't popular in America. And like David Coverdale found with Whitesnake, it was very expensive, I think, to keep musicians on the payroll to stay on that track, as it were. Obviously Coverdale, deliberately sort of adopted his sound and the musicians he hired to make a crack on the American market. So I remember John McCoy was very vocal, I think in his disappointment with Gillan. I think Ian Gillan said that he had throat problems, something like that, and that's why he was stopping Gillan, and then he joined Black Sabbath. So it was all a bit of subterfuge there, Machiavellian stuff going on. So allegedly the tale is that Gillan, met with Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler. They got all pissed. And in the morning, Ian Gillan found out he joined Black Sabbath in his drunken stupor. It's very funny. The other funny story is when they did the first gig, there was loads of dry ice on stage. Ian Gillan couldn't remember the lyrics. He had the lyrics on the stage, and of course it got covered in dry ice. On top of this, they had a Stonehenge stage set. This was, just prior to Spinal Tap. It was so big, the Stonehenge stage set, it wouldn't fit in certain venues. It's just a comedy of errors, really. Really Geezer and Tony had dropped the ball, really falling out with Dio, or maybe Dio had dropped the ball, falling out with them. They had something great there. But in spite of that, I remember my older brother buying this album, and I remember quite liking some of the tracks. I didn't go back to it, and when I did sort of cursorily dip into it, I didn't really like it, but I made a concerted effort to kind of have a delve in. I remember actually this album came out as the house I was brought up in for most of my early years. This would be probably one of the last albums bought that I listened to in that house, I think. So listening to it now, I think there's a lot to recommend on this album. I'll talk about what the big problems with it is, but essentially the music is a lot of good stuff there. Opens with Trashed, which really I think's trying to do the Neon Knights thing. It's got a so it's got quite interesting lyrics. Gillan, they recorded at the Manor in Oxford, and it had a go-kart track there. Why it had a go-kart track, I don't know, but Gillan came in pissed one night, Nick Villward's car, went racing around the go-kart track and crashed, and it burst into flames, the car. So he wrote lyrics about it. So it's a good track, it's not great. I think the other thing with this is, the first thing you notice is Tony Iommi takes a solo at the end, and it's not one of his best. I think Iommi, after his stellar performances on Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, he's not as sharp on this, and there's issues with his lead guitar sound, but we'll come to that. But this is a good opener. The next track, Stonehenge, an instrumental. This is 1 minute 58. It's quite atmospheric, but it's too long. I think they could easily have trimmed 30-40 seconds off this track. And then it goes into Disturbing the Priest. So this has got a really evil riff, proper doom-laden riff, that I really like, with some cool harmonics. Really good track, quite an interesting sort of breakdown in the verse, and then really powerful chorus. Again, Gillan wrote the lyrics about they were rehearsing at some old church and the priests nearby were complaining about the volume. So he was kind of writing lyrics based on what he was experiencing, like Smoke on the Water, and what he saw and experienced, very different from Geezer Butler's science fiction and anti-war lyrics, or Ronnie James Dio's fantasy lyrics. You've got The Dark, which is just a short instrumental, fairly pointless, and goes into Zero, a Hero. I think this is the album's standout cut, probably. So this is the riff on this. You can hear Guns N' Roses copping it for Paradise City. Got a really evil kind of single note keyboard line over the top of it. But it's got a really catchy chorus, so it manages to be dark and heavy, but Gillan's vocal styling sort of spin it in a different direction. So that's 7 minutes 37. That's the longest track on the album, and that finished side one. So good. Side two opens with the weakest track, Digital Bitch. What's interesting about this? I mean, again, I wasn't that keen on this, but on my my sort of last listen of me half dozen listens, I was kind of like, yeah, it's pretty catchy. Interesting enough, it's got a very new wobbin riff, really, something you'd expect more from Tigers of Pantang or Saxon. So you can hear like the kind of influence of what's been happening in metal there, not a typical Iommi riff. Then you've got the title track, Born Again. This is a really good ballad with an epic vocal. I would say this is among the three top tracks, 6 minutes 30. Very good. I really like this. You got Hotline. This is a kind of catchy, typical double stop riff. Again, not typical Iommi, but really works well with Gillan's vocals. And then it finishes with Keep It Warm. So the riff on this is kind of reminiscent of the thrill of it all and the groove. I think it's a good finishing track. It's actually about Ian Gillan's new relationship he's having with the woman he married, Bron. She passed away fairly recently, sadly. So again, this is a different vibe for Sabbath. So the whole album was about 40 minutes long. And I think Gillan, it works in the context of the music. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler and Bill Ward, there's a bit more story there, have got together with Ian Gillan. They've made this music, and the record label actually, there was going to be some different project. They said, well, you've got to call it Black Sabbath. And this is the thing that happened with Tony Iommi when he did Seventh Star. He had to call it Black Sabbath. So if he wanted to get the album out, the same thing happened with Ronnie Dio as well. They wanted to call it Heaven and Hell or something like that. No, you've got to be Black Sabbath. So that's one of the aspects of this. The other thing about it is, the main issue with this is the production. The production massively lets down this album. I would say this is one of the worst sounding records of its day. Another example I would pick is Forged in Fire by Anvil, which is swamped in reverb. Production really lets it down. Now, why that's happened, one of the reasons might be Ian Gillan was listening to a playback in the studio so loud it blew the tweeters. So at some point in recording, they've not realised they've blown the tweeters, and that means their top end of the sounds they're hearing back won't be properly communicated or tempered. And it has a very abrasive top end. Tony Iommi's guitar sounds actually quite painful to listen to. But the other thing is it's muddy, the bass is undefined, and the drums are quiet. It's better on some tracks. Bill Ward apparently said he was really pleased with his playing on this, and you can hear his drums well, you can hear that classic Bill Ward performance. I would say Trashed is not a good sounding track at all from a mix point of view. Disturbing the Priest is a little better, as is Sarah the Hero, but there is problems. Digital Bitch, you can hear the abrasiveness on Iommi's guitar sound, but the tracks Born Again, Hotline and Keep It Warm have a better sound. And I think if you take a track like Keep It Warm, the drums have got a better balance there, and in that moment you can kind of hear more what the album could sound like. Allegedly, Iommi has the original master tapes, were missing for a while. He is planning a remix. I do think this is a divisive album, but I think that the fans of it would love a remix, and it would sell okay. I think there's that thing, you can't polish a turd, and that the issue may be if the sounds haven't been captured well on tape, how much polishing you could do in the modern technology with Pro Tools, plugins and stuff like that, I'm not sure. But it'd definitely benefit from top end removing off the lead guitar, the drums tightening up, the bass tightening up. I should say that Gillan's vocals are captured really well. The mix on his vocals are really good. Gillan's performance is outstanding on this album. This is an album where he's got a lot of fans for his performance in this, because he goes all that metal, really. He does some amazing high screams on Born Again. He does his amazing harmonised screams. Hotline, he does like, you know, this big top note. He totally goes for it and embraces the sound. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Whether, you know, it sounds like Black Sabbath, well, I don't know. Some of it does. The heavy riffing, you know, I always say that Tony Iommi is the kind of core ingredient in Black Sabbath, his riffs, his riffing style. So when they get the really heavy shit, like Zero the Hero just doing the Priest, you know, it's got that sound. Yeah, so I do like this album. I think there's a lot to recommend it. Like I said, the production hugely compromises it. You know, sometimes you get albums that don't have great mixes, production, like Iron Maiden's debut, but it doesn't compromise the greatness of the songs. With this, it really is kind of muffling the delivery to a certain extent. I don't think this is, you know, I'm doing this as a classic album inspection, but often with these reviews I do interesting albums. I think this is an interesting album. But I still think on a bad day it's worth a 6 out of 10. There's people who love it and maybe give it an 8. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I think with a remix, maybe it would push it a bit. I think one thing I decided is I think the running order is an issue. It opens with Trashed, like I said before, trying to go for that Neon Nights thing, but what would have been better would have been cutting the Stonehenge instrumental down, opening with that as an atmospheric build-up and going into Disturbing the Priest, which just really takes your face off. And then go into Trashed, and then have the Dark going into Zero the Hero. And that would make you know, it's basically it's keeping the side one the same, it's just rearranging the tracks. Side two, I think, you know, open with Digital Bitch, but maybe switch Born Again with Hotline. Born Again's a great track, and then that would, because Born Again and Keep It Warm are two of the best tracks, so that would make it finish stronger. You could even finish with Born Again and do that classic Dio era thing where you finish with the ballad, or the heavy ballad, and I think that would be a better running order. But yeah, after this, you know, Gillan went out on tour with Sabbath. As I said, there was numerous problems with the size of their Stonehenge stage set. They also played Smoke on the Water in the set, which must have been bizarre. I've always found that strange when you get, you know, big players in a band and then they have to play one of the songs. I went to see Glenn Hughes and they played a Whitesnake, because Doug Aldridge was playing. They played a Whitesnake, Doug Aldridge song. I mean, if I've, you know, I would just be like, why? You know, let's do the stuff people want to hear. But yeah, so that is the Born Again album. Like I said, god awful album cover. Regularly said it's one of the worst album covers ever. It looks like if you know Total Recall, it looks like someone's coloured Quato in from Total Recall, painted him red and giving him yellow fingernails. Yeah, and doing that satanic thing, which, you know, is kind of like pandering to kind of the base instinct of what people thought Sabbath were. But yeah, the reviews, All Music 1 star, Blender 1 star, Metal Forces 8 out of 10, Martin Popoff 10, Rolling Stone Album Guide 3. It shows you the division on this. But check it out. Hopefully there'll be a remix one day, and that would give the kind of better account of this record. So remember to share and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed that classic album inspection. Born Again, 40 years old today, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks very much. Just quickly, I apologise for the lighting. It's a kind of a bit of a muggy day. I've tried to get better in this office, but I'm kind of looking a bit soft focused. But anyway, sorry. Cheers. See you again soon.